it's just, we did a whole study with the media and
Okay, you're on the
ACLT.
record, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
They did a recording of all of the mentions, and it is
I will. Let
amazing
me
how
send Dean his
effective
email.
Okay, thank you.
it's laziness in reporting.
Anyway, I reached out to them a lot. This is not East Anchorage. Lake Otis and Tudor is not East Anchorage.
Literally, it happened on A Street, and they're like, murder in Fairview.
Yeah.
It's squarely in South Edition.
Yeah.
We don't want to say that because that's our nice
Last meeting.
Are you getting tired of everybody?
That's a movie.
Let's call another one.
What do you put that on the record?
Let's call another one quick.
Yeah. It would be properly noticed, yes.
What?
That's perfect.
What?
That fulfills the narrative.
What?
Yes.
I didn't miss
We're just playing around, don't worry.
Yeah, but we.
Ready when you are, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's go ahead and start. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this work session on AO 2019-116S regarding building safety and fire department fees, fines, and penalties to order. Let's go ahead and start with introductions.
Nice.
Crystal Kennedy.
John Weddleton.
Forrest Dunbar.
Christopher Bronston.
Suzanne McGrath.
Felix Rivera.
Chris Schutte, Director of Economic Development.
Bob Dole, Development Services Director and Building Official.
Bart Meinhardt, Anchorage Fire Department.
All right, so for today, we're going to go through the S version, and I think there have been some changes made to it and various amendments, and then hear from whoever we have in our audience to talk about this. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chris to get us started.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the lights. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, this is an S version of 2019-116 to modify fees in the various municipal codes. Through a series of stakeholder meetings, and one of which included the last work session that we did with this body, we cobbled together a list of about a dozen, I think, modifications to the original ordinance that are now in this S version draft that will be up for public hearing and potentially action at the October 22 meeting. So we're going to just go real quick through how we got to here today and what the S versions are, and open it up for questions and comments. And thank you, Joe. Turn it over to Bob, so if you want to.
Next slide, please. Hi, Bob Dole, Director of Development Services. How we got here today, I'd say there are basically three things. Go back to 2009 and look at us today. Today we're trying to pay for 2019 cost of $2,009. And we're doing it with fixed fees set in 2009. If we had gone to a valuation-based system rather than a fixed cost per inspection back then, the difference in our shortfall would be 8% rather than 28% in looking at revenues versus cost going forward. Two other factors happened at that same time. First, the cost that was fixed back then, even in 2009, we were not revenue neutral. When we changed to go into a cost per inspection for remodels, we stayed in the deficit territory 8 out of 10 years going forward from there. And so we didn't get the rate right then. The third item is, when we went to a cost per inspection, we created an increasing administrative burden to justify the inspection times there to the extent that inspector staff in the field is spending 8 to 10% of their time not doing inspections, not doing reports of inspections, not doing research to go out and do inspections, but instead doing the bureaucratic timekeeping. Coming from the law field, for private lawyers, you can do this because they're on salary, you're working like rented mules, and you don't have to pay for their time. However, where we have to pay for the time of folks, it does create a problem. So what we did going forward to get to this point, we went to back to evaluation-based system as we had prior to 2009 for remodels. If that way the fees correct themselves with the prices going up or down based in accordance with cost of living and construction fees going forward. We also took those fixed fees that had not been adjusted since 2009 and brought them up to 2019 pricing going forward. We've also, there's kind of a smorgasbord you'll see of other minor things.
I'm sorry, you're using the tense "we have." Is this what you're proposing to do, or you did do this recently?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Dunbar, this is what we're proposing in this ordinance going forward. We have proposed, I should be saying.
Okay.
And what we're offering to you is how we would go about doing this to make something that adjusts to 2019 cost and then is sustaining, so we don't have to come back year to year to year to ask you to adjust our fees up or down based on what the inflation or deflation is doing going forward. Instead, there's built-in mechanisms to do that with the ICC tables that by ordinance we use every year for evaluation. Next slide, please. The major things going forward. There's no change for building safety fees for new construction. It stays the same. We believe we got that right back then. There's a slight adjustment in fees for the zoning review, which is a Title 21 fee, a 101 fund for you all versus a 181 fund for building safety. In doing that, we corrected the actual prices it cost today to provide those services. On a single-family home, that's about a $300 to $400 additional fee. The largest we could find was a $6 million project, would be about $800 additional fee, and that would be the only increase at $800 on a $6 million project, which is well within the range, probably what even the price of nails would change to during it. We had several stakeholder meetings. If you go to the next slide, please. And those present these you see here. The first one, a small projects discounted rate. We looked at 40,000 as kind of, if you use valuation rate for what we thought would be a minimal fee of $350, that's the break-even point of per inspection versus doing it on a valuation rate. So if you're doing a project that requires a permit and it takes one inspection, you pay $175. If it's under 40,000. If it's over, if it takes two inspections, you pay $350 under our proposed S version. And if you're over 40,000 valuation, you go straight up to what 23. It would be the number, which is the baseline otherwise. So you actually, for the individual homeowner trying to do their own project, do that bathroom or something, it gives them the cheaper option either way. By that, we encourage them to actually get a building permit and ensure that they have a safe built-to-code function. Next, we looked at permitting fees for accessibility equipment. The concern here with an aging in place population, we want to facilitate them actually staying near the facilities are available for them. So accessibility are things like chair lifts, things like that. This is a policy-based decision to encourage that ongoing presence in the market to discount those fees. Next, Fire and Bart is here to speak to that if necessary. For the fees for cold weather emergency shelters based upon assembly feedback, we would reduce that to the current rate, or that's a new.
It would reduce it to the current rate of $35 and keep it there.
Yeah. The next one you see there is the affordable housing building permit fee reduction, and I see that there's members of Cook Inlet Housing Authority in the audience who can better address what that does for them. That again is a policy-based decision to encourage the development of affordable housing in Anchorage. As your development services director, probably the toughest situation I encounter week to week is the lack of affordable housing that comes to a head. It also over-indexes in code abatement or dangerous conditions. And weekly we have a situation where we have a choice. We either do a notice to vacate, knowing that somebody is now either headed for either Brother Francis Shelter or the park, or we allow them to stay in a place that is gut-wrenching in terms of the risk of some of the danger. We support a method to increase quality affordable housing for that lower end of the rental market in terms of what individuals can afford to pay. They give quality there. Also, if any of you have been to an AEDC luncheon, you've heard Bill Popp talk about the importance of affordable housing for those entry-level workers, and we believe this supports that as a necessary foundation for our wage and labor base. Finally, alternative valuation for remodels. When we met with AHBA, concern was voiced about how we would fairly find out what the fair amount is for valuation. Some the belief that people would underreport. Frankly, that's how we got to the per inspection basis back in 2009. Going forward, we've done extensive research going into this. We have found no other jurisdiction that addresses remodels by going to a per inspection basis. We're a unicorn in adopting that. The method we propose as an alternative for those who don't want to disclose it as a discrepancy in the amount is using standard ICC cost tables and then applying what jurisdictions have been doing, several on the West Coast. We frankly adopted the different steps used in Kirkland, Washington, of looking at the level of work being done and putting it in one of four categories to get those four different rates based on the new square footage involved. And that'd be done by one of my plan reviewers at no cost to the individual. So those are the changes we have done going forward, are the major, just kind of in a nutshell of it.
And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay. So let's start the
Just help me
discussion.
get the lights, please.
Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. I guess I got a couple things. I wanted to start with the accessibility equipment. So somebody has, goes to one of the home remodel shows and they see the stairway lift people there and they have them come in and put a stairway lift in their home. Now the community has to go into that home and inspect it.
Through the chair, Assembly Member Kennedy, inside the building safety service area, that is correct. It is one of those things that is comes under Title 23. It is a one-time inspection. It is not an annual inspection. The biggest issue on those is how well it is attached to the wall. There's about a 1/3 rate that require additional support to the wall to make sure it won't tip forward. But that does come under the Title 23 building code, yes.
And so the installation people don't know that. They don't know how to install the equipment, so they need the community to come in and
Through
make
the
sure
chair,
it's done
Assembly
correctly.
Member
I
Kennedy.
guess I don't understand the need for an inspection.
It depends who installs it. We have some companies that does these day in and day out, and we go through and it's fast. We have others, it's the first one they've ever done, and it requires some additional work.
And if I can add some color to that, it's not that installers need someone to show them how to do their job. There are a lot of electrical and structural issues that can be raised through installing these stairway lifts, which is why they actually have their own section of the International Residential Code anyway to deal with how those are attached. Inspectors' roles is just to make sure that the installer has installed it according to the code. It's not to inspect how well they're doing their work, I guess is one way to say it.
It has to stay attached to the wall with a full weight load, and the installers have a full design weight that they put on to go up and down. And the electrical part, if necessary, has to be code compliant.
Well, thank you. And I guess just as a philosophy, that kind of oversight bothers me when it's kind of like somebody looking over somebody else's shoulder, looking over somebody else's shoulder, looking over somebody else's shoulder. Anyway, next question though was in regard to the bottom one that you talked about, the alternative valuation. So can you go over again how that's actually determined? I mean, are there real estate professionals going in and okay, so who actually has the ability to really value? Okay, go ahead, go with that one, and then I've got something else with that, if you don't mind. So.
Okay, through the chair, Assembly Member Kennedy, for that valuation, when they come in, we use our plan reviewers who are licensed engineers in the state of Alaska with project management experience, and they have costing tables to tell you if you're doing this level of work, it runs in this range. They price the plywood. There's data to price the approximate labor involved as a ballpark for the carpentry or the other skills involved.
Okay, so, all right, so how does that actually differ then? I guess I'm still trying to get to the proper way that we value buildings or homes or whatever in terms of how that looks, how that comes from the real estate community when they're going out to value property as well. What's the word, what's the term?
Through the
You're
chair,
trying to get
Assembly-
value on your home?
Assemblymember Kennedy, you're asking for an apples and oranges comparison. We do not assess the change in value of the home based on adding that addition. We assess the cost of permit required work involved in doing that. Many times people will spend more on an addition or an amenity than their value goes up in appraised value. But the valuation approach as dictated by the ICC, which we followed in the tables and all that we have adopted, is based on the work effort involved, not on the change in value to the structure of the property.
So not really on the materials themselves, because that was kind of going to be my next question, is obviously somebody can do something in 1,000 square feet that would cost 3 times what somebody else would do in that 1,000 square feet. So, so it's not based really on the materials that are being used, whether you're using tile floor versus vinyl.
Through the chair, Assembly Member Kennedy, that's correct. We can assess approximate hours involved, and When we go to these formulas for valuation, it's based on a generic or a mid-range of the different options for the type of work involved. By the way, vinyl versus tile, neither of those require a permit. It's when you start ripping up the floor underneath and putting it in that we
Well, I'm
get
just saying
value.
that as part of the components that go into that 1,000 square foot renovation or whatever it is. So that was just an example of material differences, so.
And Assemblymember Candy, I would add, we looked at your discussion from last time about why we don't do combo inspections. If we, looking at data from the last 2 years for where we have multiple inspections on the same site on the same day, the average would save us about 120 hours per year in work effort. There's on average about 410 to 420 two inspections, same property, same day. That 120 hours savings, mostly the driving time from site to site. My challenge, though, is in keeping a inspector current in multiple trades. Just one inspector, I spend 120 hours of training time per year to maintain currency and proficiency in plumbing and mechanical, electrical, and carpentry. So at best, it's a break-even proposition after you overcome the higher training costs. And what those would likely come out to is a higher starting pay in the pay scheme.
Oh, I see, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Why aren't there a bunch of developers beating down a door about this? Why isn't this more controversial amongst the development community, the building community? We seem to be pretty sensitive to whenever we do anything. And I don't know, there might be a few folks here, but could you just go through exactly what happened and why we haven't gotten angry emails?
Through the chair, I think that the form of this question was asked last time. I don't know that nobody likes the price of their project or their work going up.
Sure.
My thinking is that hopefully people understand the underlying rationale of why this is happening, which is to create a system that actually supports the services that are provided. This is not an increase in fees simply for the purpose of increasing fees and boosting our profits. We are not a for-profit company. This is simply about covering the cost of administering a public service in the area. That's one possibility, and I can't really speak at great length to why they're not beating down your door. Maybe they're just not beating down your door yet. I don't know.
Well, that's what I wanted. Do they know this is happening?
Yeah, through the chair, if I may, we've met, specifically we've met with at least with the executive director of the Alaska General Contractors. We met with a group of the Anchorage Home Builders Association. This is now the second work session on this topic, and we've met individually with many of you as well. And from what I have heard, it's been shared at community councils from some assembly members, et cetera. So I think, I hope the news is out there.
And through the chair, to add to Chris's explanation, yesterday we've been responding also in written emails to HBA queries, providing them a breakdown of what staff does what, the different revenue versus operating expenses, addressing some other conceptions and misconceptions out in the public about the level of service we provide and how.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dice.
I couldn't see my ears perk up when you said added the phrase and reduce some fees. Have you done that in the last couple of years?
Through the chair, Assemblymember, reduce fees or reduce staff?
Fees.
Fees. Through the chair, to my knowledge, we have not reduced, but we have one proposed here, at least one, and some other options.
We are trying to increase. Chris, when I first met you, I asked about, the homeowners were singing the song and dance that we overcharged them for years, and it was a huge balance. And instead of reducing the fees, you snuck off in the middle of the night with those monies and spent it on something else, and probably something valid. But refresh my memory, and then when we do build a surplus, can we carry that forward?
Yeah, if I may, through the chair, what Assemblymember Dice is referring to is the balance of the Fund 181. This is a fee-supported service area, for lack of a better term. And yes, there have been withdrawals, massive withdrawals from the 181 fund over a decade ago to help fund other portions of city government that during a building boom couldn't keep up with the work that was coming online. And that has been a sore spot for a lot of industry people who in many ways feel that the 181 fund is, quote, their fund. What this ordinance does, it's not focused solely on trying to rebuild that deficit, fill that hole. It certainly helps, though, that we're not making the hole bigger every year.
Well, as Ethan says, often you have to walk somebody else's dog. None of you, I think maybe you were, here to be buried in that burden, but yeah, thank you.
You bet.
And through the chair, Assemblymember Dyson, we think this does address some equities. For instance, it creates where if you only have a septic or a well, you don't have to pay a flat rate COSA that is normally set to cover both of them. We create a 50% off if you only have one instead of both systems, starting with this going forward. We also in there create an option if we look at to make the work effort more commensurate with the work involved. If you look, you asked a few months ago about the old Mother Lawrence house up in Mountain View. Under this pricing scheme, it would actually be less for the permit fees and more for that, based on how it would be modeled and more commensurate with the actual work involved. So this does allow for some fees to go down. To say it is a fee increase on remodels is an incomplete characterization. Some also go down.
Thank you. Mrs. Nichols.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, my question was along the lines of Mr. Dunbar's in terms of the outreach meetings. We had received, I think, an email from someone from Alan Peterson saying that they hadn't heard about it, but it sounds like there have been other
Yeah, if I may, through the chair, the email you're referencing is from Kyle Marcus. Kyle Marcus is the president of AHBA. I don't believe Kyle actually was in the audience when we met with AHBA, though there were probably close to over a dozen AHBA members in that room. That's also through Kyle to AHBA. Bob mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of response back to some of the questions and concerns they've raised about this ordinance.
And through the chair, I started this laying out this dilemma to Kyle at AHBA and Ellen Peterson back in May, showing us this is the picture, looking for ideas. It's been a while that we've been going back and forth, and he has been the one that we've been mostly corresponding with on behalf of AHBA and CC and the other board members.
Thank you. We'll get to audience in a minute. We have a few more. Yeah. Whittleton.
I guess following up on Forrest, so I had a couple questions emailed to me, and I'm not even quite, it was a compilation, but I wonder, could I just go through a few of those?
Sure.
And it's, and I will, and it was look at why aren't they mad? Well, I will tone this down a little bit. But one says that for the first time in a long time, we've been using a portion of the permit fees for the general fund, whereas the past policy has been that approximately half of the building safety budget costs were covered by the general fund on the thought that the public receives a benefit. Is that true? Okay, so
I'm not sure I follow that logic. The more accurate way to state this is that the services provided by the Building Statement Development Services Department have not been covered by fees, 181 fees, since, well, there was one off year in 2014 where revenues exceeded expenses, but the general condition since 2009 has been no. And let me finish that thought. So in the instances where the 181 fees don't cover the 181 services, general government makes up that difference.
when you had a surplus, did it go into the 181 fund?
Correct. Yeah.
It did not go to general government. Okay, yeah, so that was kind of odd. It's not clear what inspections are in the permit fee and what inspections are not included in the permit fee.
So, through the chair, Assembly Member Weddleton, I'm not sure who, basically any fee tied to a Title 23 service. So those inspections and for new construction plan reviews are your structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing are your 181 funded items. Zoning review, because it's a Title 21 issue, is 101 funded. But I have never heard that. That's the first time I've heard that one. I thought I'd heard a lot of them.
Well, I think somewhat this shows, even with my thin knowledge, I was going, okay, they're confused
Right,
too.
yeah.
So, and then this is pretty common actually. You know.
So the short version, if it's Title 23 enforcement funded in the BSSA, it's 181 funded. If it's anything else, it's 101.
But if you were to do it by valuation, you get your inspections are in that, so there are no additional inspection fees. What if you inspected and came back to re-inspect and they had not fixed it? Then do you kick into that punitive?
Through the chair, the only time punitive kicks in is on a reinspection of the same item in the same place not being corrected. The first time we see it, there's no additional cost. If we come back and it is not corrected, at that time there would be a fee. I've yet to have that happen. I know I'm not exactly long-term here. What generally happens after the first one, before they come out the second one, is the builder calls or the foreman calls because they feel there's an ambiguity in the code that needs to be resolved. So this is theoretically possible. Going through the bulk of business building season, it hasn't come up yet.
Okay. Then there's an accusation that the 180 fund was raided, but that's old news. And then there's a question, how many employees have been laid off in the downturn? And you actually had a chart to show.
Through the chair, Assembly Member Weddleton, our staff is 1/3 later now from that downturn if we go back to 2009 versus now, as we sit with 38 people in this area. So doing math in public would be another 19 more that are no longer there. We've reduced our staffing by 1/3. We've reduced and our staff per permit by 1/3. And I remain open going forward if we find more efficiencies. There's nothing ironclad about our current staffing level if and when we find more efficiencies.
And I'll add to that, Member Weddleton, that the staffing, at least during my short time here, has stayed static with the exception of some Assembly appropriated money to increase our code enforcement capacity.
And those are 101 fund.
Why are third-party reviews and inspections not allowed? Would this help?
Through the chair, Assembly Member Weddleton, so reviews are allowed, and 80% of our residential housing is done in the BSSA by third-party reviewers. The result of that is the insurance industry does not rate our program for building safety. The result of that, in turn, is every Anchorage person gets to pay a little more in their homeowner insurance. By comparison, on the commercial side, where the numbers are much bigger, there is absolutely no demand signal for third-party plan reviews or for third-party inspection because you pay for it in insurance on the back end. We had, moreover, from a public safety standpoint, from a policy perspective, third-party inspections did not perform as well looking at those in the northern communities versus in Anchorage based on what FEMA is saying during the earthquake. From a public safety perspective, we have reservations. But the biggest reason is if we look at the commercial sector, which is at least 2/3 of the sector, there is absolutely no interest in third-party inspections.
Interesting. Can I two more?
Sure.
Again, I'm channeling from this. Permits take longer to get and more information is required. Instead of confirming that licensed design professionals completed the requirements, the MOA often wants to redesign. Maybe that's just they're venting. Doesn't really regard your fees.
Through the chair, Assembly Member Weldon, the role, and we're talking primarily here about plan review, where the role of the municipality is to assure compliance with the building code. That does involve a sampling of the plans to assure they comply. Otherwise, why bother? And you do not meet the ICC intent for assuring that it is code compliant. Some plans may take longer, but again, we see a higher level of performance. And if I look at some of the homes certified to meet earthquake standards outside the BSSA that were missing key seismic hardening features that are crucial to safety, that have been reported in the media, so there's no secret here, that validates why you have to have that second set of eyes. Some, frankly, go really fast. Others may bog down.
You made a comment. A sampling of, you don't check every.
No, through the chair, no. We sample. If there's a stamp there of somebody who's licensed in good standing, Generally, it is a small sampling of the work involved to make sure it's in the ballpark. If something is inherently wrong, we have a significant issue with the commercial permit came in that just some calculations were off. The number of foundation footers on one page doesn't match the number on the next page. So it isn't clear where the foundation is going. Those create more problems, but generally, we don't check it line by line. That's why you use a licensed engineer with a valid errors and omissions policy for your building.
Okay. This is more of an editorial comment. So I guess that was the end of the questions that were sent. But that was, I think, relatively few questions, really. And I went fishing. So I mean, no one wants to spend more, but I do kind of get the sense this is not, a crisis. That's my sense of it. And I went looking.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. I don't know if you have an answer for this or not, but do you know if there are any financial impacts to the Anchorage School District with these increases?
Through the chair, Assembly Member Kennedy, we have, I've known Tom Roth for years. He has not contacted or shared any with us. Having known him since 2012, I have no doubt he would have brought it to my attention if there were. Obviously, it costs more, but frankly, for the size projects they do, it is insignificant where there is an increase on a remodel. If I look at some of their recent ones that seemed to take a zillion inspections, I'm thinking of Re-Roof of West, I think it may have actually come out a little cheaper under this methodology.
Okay.
As long as they can get away from weekend inspections that I still have to charge more.
Well, in some of these cases, though, I mean, they're not doing just major remodels in that. In some cases, they're just replacing a boiler or something. But there are increases for that as well, correct? Any kind of inspection.
Through the chair, Assembly Member Kennedy, we reset the base price to basically the equivalent of $300 to $350 an hour loaded. That includes not only the inspector out there, but also paying for the permit process that underlays it, the facility, the vehicle use, the training, the HR support, the IT support. So there is an increase in the base there, but by the change in methodologies, I think they also garner some savings there. It isn't a straight increase.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn.
Thank you. I might have misheard this on Tuesday night. And the fact that there didn't appear to be a lot of people lined up for public testimony on Tuesday night, if any. I don't know if they knew we were going to push forward. But I thought there was talk of some kind of significant amendment. Was that to this ordinance? Does anyone have an amendment? If so, can we talk about it today?
I can partially answer that, Mr. Chairman. What I think we were trying to convey is that in between the time it had been introduced and the meeting this week, we had heard from people with suggested amendments.
Okay.
And our request through the chair to you all was if you have amendments that you'd like to roll into an S version, because we had significant changes of our own, or a significant change of our own, then we asked for people to submit those. And we got, I would say, about 5 or 6 amendments from assembly members to roll into the S version, all of which are reflected here.
Oh, okay. This is the S version.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr.
And-
Conklin. Oh, go ahead.
And just to add on what Chris said, just the change here is about $65,000 less a year in revenue collected by adding these amendments in here. It has I think, a de minimis financial impact.
And I'm sorry, could you restate what's the overall expected increase in revenue from this ordinance?
Through the chair, Assembly Member Dunbar, every year varies in valuation. I would say, based on our current assumptions, the rate's about $1.6 million.
Is that for you and the fire department, or just for you?
Just for the development services.
Fire department's about 100,000.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I mean, we would know how much is in the budget for this year, because we have a certain, there's an
Yeah.
assumption this passes, and that's in the
Yeah,
budget.
through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, OMB, given the timing of the budget, the timing of this request, they did include that revenue in the 2020 budget.
Do you remember how much they did?
I don't remember the total amount, but like Bob said, it is a $1.6 million increase in 181 fees expected over last year. Now, the part that's confusing or maybe challenging in comparing budget years, it's not always apparent what is the actual revenue received and what is the budgeted revenue received. So I think if you look at 19 versus 20 operating budget, it's only an incremental increase in the projected revenue to be received. The difference being that in previous years we were just way off because the fees weren't actually generating the revenue to fill that hole. So without having it in front of me, I can't tell you what the exact difference is, but it's reflected in there.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
So we have 3 people in the audience here, 2 experts from Cook County and an unknown individual who expressed an interest to talk. And we started 15 minutes late. We have 7 minutes left. I'd like to see if we can move to that part of the topic.
Yeah, we're good. Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question. So it's been 10 years since fees were raised, or since 2009, I think. Fire fund fees, anyway, haven't changed. I was just wondering, like, when would be the next time you would review fees again? Are you thinking it'll be like 5 years out or another 10 years? Some of these are-
Through the chair, for Title 23 non-fire fees, I would suggest if we go to evaluation basis, we don't need to. The 2009 fees still work today because they hold value based on the shift in valuation rates with inflation or deflation. If we go to a fixed fee, we'll have to see what the economy does. But the year after you go to a fixed fee, it starts gaining or losing value depending on the economy.
It's one of the reasons why the normal methodology for calculating building permitting fees across the country is based on the ICC's valuation table. It folds in, as Bob said, prices of materials, inflation, et cetera. So we probably wouldn't have to go back to you for, at least for the building safety side. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So that's all I have in the queue. We can go ahead and go to members of the audience. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in.
All right.
Jeff Judd, Executive Vice President of Cook County Housing Authority Real Estate Development Department, and Mark Kleinman is our Vice President of Project Management and Development with me. First, just really appreciate on behalf of Cook County Housing Authority the Assembly's taking up this action and the administration's drafting an inclusion of the affordable sort of housing fee reduction opportunity. I wanted to actually I'm going to take 10 seconds to thank Mr. Dole and Mr. Dole's predecessor, Ross Nossinger, was a building official, I think, interim in the case of Ross. But Building Permit Center has sort of, I know, at time to time been criticized about processing permit fee requests and whatever. My point is I want to thank them because over the last year and a half, 2 years, our experience has been very positive, in that process, and both from an attempt to expedite the process of permit approval and understand the mechanics in the industry about complex housing code and zoning, and so I'd be remiss in not sort of acknowledging that. Even Chris has been helpful from time to time. So I wanted to, as I said, wanted to support the effort on behalf of Cook County Housing Authority. I think what it says to the community, that's and not just the Housing Authority, but other affordable housing developers in our community, is that we value and we support affordable housing. A fee reduction helps the viability of these developments for being developed in the first time. I'm sure you all recognize affordable housing development has huge financial gaps in their viability to be built in the first place, and we have been as an organization good at accessing other resources to help bring those projects to fruition. I'm sure you've all seen the Elizabeth Place project down just a couple blocks away that's scheduled to be complete in about a month. But it takes an incredible amount of resource capture to make those projects viable, and a permit fee reduction frankly helps the muni support a tool in the affordable housing industry's ability to access that tool to help bring some increased viability to these developments. I will say that what's happening around the state is an increased amount of competition for a very scarce resource. These affordable housing gap funds, if you will, mostly as pass-through funds from the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, most of them being federal funds. But the competition statewide is increasing, the cost of construction continues to go up, and the viability of development generally getting harder and harder, and these type of tools that help us bridge these gaps and provide, in effect, leverage to our effort to bring these projects to fruition, make sure that our increases in likelihood that Anchorage proposed projects are competing against statewide projects with that very scarce resource, and ultimately the ability to provide affordable housing to our community and the economic development that comes about as a result of those developments. So I think ultimately, we thought about, well, why affordable housing and not other types of developments, child care centers, or a variety of other sort of community-based projects or services that are here. I think our answer to that, as I thought about it overnight, was simply that affordable housing and housing in general has been a goal, a critical need goal in the city's consolidated plan, various housing needs assessments, the annual action plan that the municipality adopts through the assembly. That's essentially embodiment of the pass-through of federal funds to support affordable housing, and that need isn't going away. And this tool, if you will, just creates essentially a statement by the assembly and by the city that says we value and we support affordable housing, and we value that we need to be part of that solution to enable affordable housing to be actually developed in our community. So happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Reynolds.
If you were to not have gotten the 75% discount, do you feel like this increase in fees would be kind of a big problem for you?
Mr. Gold helped us sort of assess. We went back over the last couple of years and then took the properties that we actually have developed in the affordable housing arena and compared what we paid for permit fees under the current regime compared to what the new proposal would result in. The larger the project, I think, and not including rehab projects, those are the most affected, I think, comprehensive rehab. New construction projects that are, in the probably plus $5 million range in terms of valuation, I think, in the system, had about a 1% increase in the overall permit fee. Duplexes and fourplexes tend to be more in the 4% range. So, it's very dependent on the type of structure and the value, but ultimately, an increase in the fee in of itself just further exacerbates the financial gap that affordable housing has. The reduction that's proposed here, the overall fees go up, and then this reduction would be essentially a discount from that increase. The overall, clearly, it's a reduction in the permit fees associated with affordable housing. And what in our view, what it does is creates an incentive, a tool to ensure that those types of developments remain as viable as we can. They're just one tool in a bucket of hopefully many tools available that would support that effort.
Can I get a clarification? When you said 1%, you don't mean 1% of the project?
No.
1%. Fees went up 1%.
Correct. Yeah, 1% of the permit fee itself was included. The permit fee itself is going up by about 1%.
Okay, and following up on that, so you say you're competing against other projects across the state. So would you, in your grant request, say that the municipality has shown support by offering 75% discount, and that statement helps you out, or is it just the dollar amount decrease?
Yeah, Mr. Wilton, it does. In fact, the municipality receives home funds, federal home grant funds that pass through, and part of that requirement to receive of those funds is to actually for the muni to contribute or to receive what's known as matching funds, a fee abatement or reduction in this case. I don't know how you want to describe it, actually would count as match against that federal matching requirement. So in that case, it would, in our applications for perhaps say Alaska Housing pass-through funds, their rating essentially would include leverage funds as well, and we'd be able to show those as part of that leverage.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Yeah, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Niall Williams. Apologies for my late arrival and interrupting. I wanted to first talk about the affordable housing building permit fee reduction. So it states with regards to 50% of the units.
Actually, sir, if you could just clarify, are you representing an organization?
Myself.
Okay, perfect.
So it states that 50% or more of the residential units constructed or renovated must be affordable, right? So under this argument, let's say I have 2 studio apartments and 1 large apartment, and I renovate the 2 studio apartments and make them affordable, and I live in the large portion of the house that's 90%, under that, I could get the discount at 75% of the fees. Also, the future of building is multi-use properties, such as where you can have a commercially zoned space and as well have residential. Under this, it would allow for a discount under the entire building permit of the whole space. It doesn't clarify when there's multi-use properties in question. So that would be my first comment. Secondly, what is your name, sir?
Hi, I'm Bob Dole, the building official.
Mr. Dole, you had said that those companies in good standing, that you would just seek to do a small sampling of certain parts of the building safety process, right? So good standing, how many errors in judgment or mistakes could a company have and still be allowed to be good standing?
Through the chair, sir, Mr. Williams, good standing means, are they in good standing? Do they have a state license? We don't give them a report card on how they're doing.
Okay.
If they're holding a valid state of Alaska engineers or architect license, that's how we define good standing.
So I as, not a builder, but hypothetically as a builder, go out and, speak with an engineer and have them help me design plans, right? Not always in every project is the engineer on site to verify that these safety concerns are being adequately put into place. And especially in an area where we are at risk for another earthquake. In fact, there's a drill in another 6 days, I believe, for that earthquake, right? So it's a very major concern. So again, what would you consider to be a small sampling? How
Actually,
many?
sir, so before you go on, I think, do we have anyone else in the audience that wants to speak?
I'm good for now.
Okay.
This should be my final question.
Sure. I just want to put out there that we do have audience participation for this. I think it was a continued public hearing, correct? So there will be a chance to testify before the assembly. But if you have one final point, then go ahead.
It was just, what is a small sampling? What percentage? If you were to say have 100 of these safety issues that you had to inspect, how many would be a small sample?
Through the chair, Mr. Williams, first, thank you for your support of the Great Alaska Shakeout coming recently from the emergency management field. I think it's important we all support
Yes, sir.
that. It would be a good fight. Moving beyond that, you raised an important question about the engineer not on site. That's why building safety service area services are twofold. First, the plan review where the engineers look what the engineer does, and second, that's why you have inspectors out there who make sure that the approved plan is actually being carried out there with good workmanship. Make sure that shear wall has the right nail pattern and those other important factors you mentioned. And frankly, it depends on the project, the complexity. I would hazard to give a percentage on a straight up residential shear wall of a standard sort. It is going to be relatively small. On a complex structure, walls for hangar doors are probably the worst, where you got to lift up a quarter of the building at the time. It gets a little more involved in terms of validating models, so there isn't a set number. It's very situation specific, and that's why we have engineers doing it. It's not a cookie-cutter formula that I'll do 5% or something. And frankly, once you do find an issue, that's where it may grow. So in terms of what you're looking at.
I see. So along that line, do you assess risk factors to
and
at least
actually, sir,
allocate?
I have to close this work session. So if you have any
Thank
more,
you.
you can do it.
Actually,
Thank you very much.
I'd like to hear the answer to the, if you had 2 units and one was the 6,000 square foot glorious thing and the other one was your little 500 square foot ADU, do you get that discount on the whole project?
So through the chair, if I may, and Jett's going to correct everything I say right now. But it depends on the classification of affordable under this will depend on, I keep calling it certification. I'm sure that's the wrong term, but certification from many of the funding sources that he listed. So for example, in order for it to qualify for affordable housing funds, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, I don't think in your hypothetical example would get funded through HUD allotment or through AHFC, but they are issued essentially award letters, if you will. It says this project qualifies, and these are the number of units, et cetera, et cetera. It's not part of this ordinance, but in conversations with some of our affordable housing builders, we will do if this passes, we will do a follow-on policy issuance. Policies are things we issue to help clarify code. We'll do a policy issuance that spells out the required submittal materials for this affordable housing discount, and it will essentially say you have to turn in your funding, award letters and things like that, and it will tie final issuance of the CO to recording the deed, which usually happens. They'll record the income limits via the deed. We'll get a copy of that to prove that it is indeed an affordable housing project. That'll close out the permit at that point.
And through the chair, we would look at the portion of the valuation that is for housing, not for retail space. We're applying this definition, because those are separate categories under the ICC tables.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.